What is up, everybody? Escape211 here, and we're getting into some Mech Arena basics once again. This time we're going to focus on the progress path, and I've done a video on the progress path, a series of videos on this a while ago. It was about a year ago. I actually saw a reminder about it on Facebook, and it made me think, I need to redo this. So I'm actually going to redo this one now, and you know, a lot has changed in the progress path. We have new stuff added, and the whole goal is really just to quickly rifle through this and give you some general tips on what I think is worth getting, what's not worth getting, what's worth investing to, and what's just getting, you know, worth getting for right now. All right, so that is what we're going to focus on, just that. And I'm going to go back to the beginning of the progress path on this baby account that I got. All right, and right away we get the Lancer and the RPG to early game. These are fun for that, but they're not really good to invest in too much early on. Lancer is not a bad mech, but one that's really expensive to invest in early on and probably better to deal with later. So I would say don't worry about investing in either one of these. Then we have the autocannon 2. If you need a 2 energy slot, you can get it, but definitely not one you want to invest in. You probably don't even need to get it. I wouldn't. The RPG 4 is another one where you can get, probably don't need to invest much into. 2 and 4 energies, just in general, you're not going to really use beyond like super early game, and even 6 energy ones you're going to have mild or like only specific uses for. That said, let's look at the Thermal Lance 6 here. This is actually a weapon because it's the highest of the Thermal Lance and one that is useful for support. Will be great later on, so you can get it now and you may have some use for it, but it's not going to be super good even early game, and we'll see benefits after you upgrade it a decent amount, but one where you can kind of get and just put a pin in, work on it later. The Juggernaut is your first tank option that is available to you. Good one to get. You also have a daily that's connected to this one when you get it, and it mostly gives you almost all your resources back for the A coins that you spend on it, so it's worth doing. This is a solid tank, good early game, but it's one that you need to invest a lot into, and probably one you don't want to do right away because there's other important stuff to get. So good to get, and then maybe again work on later. Thermal Lance 2, don't need to worry about that one. Too weak. Plasma Cannons 4, not really happy with the Plasma Cannon family. Probably not a great one to get or invest in my opinion. Don't need to get this one. The Thermal Lance 4, same kind of thing. Don't need to get it. It has weird fringe uses later on, like with some odd builds, but one that you probably don't need to get or worry about right now. All right, Long Arm 8. Now, if you're a sniper or if you're good at sniping or you want to snipe, this is the weapon for you. This is actually a great one to get. This is probably the first uncommon or 2-star weapon that I would recommend getting and then investing into. This one will work for early to mid and then even some a little bit in the late game. So it's a really solid weapon to get, especially if you want to do some sniping. Then we get both of these that come up together. The RPG 6 is the highest in the RPG family and a decent one. Certainly worth getting and doing some upgrade, probably a couple star upgrades. And then the Panther here, which is great. This is one of the top 3 mechs in the game, considered at least by a lot of people. I think it's one of the best. Definitely worth getting and then investing into. This one costs some 8 coins, so hopefully you have some with you, but definitely want to get this one and invest into it for late game even. All right. Then we have the Javelin Rack 4. Again, 4 energy weapons, not super pumped about, not really great for uses later on, but this one isn't too bad. The Javelin Rack 4 actually used to cost just credits, and I think it's 8 coins now. It originally cost 8 coins when I did the progress path at first, and then when they changed it to credits, it wasn't that bad, and then it became 8 coins again, I think. I think it costs 8 coins now. Maybe you can let me know in the comments, any of you who are early game that know the difference, but if it's credits, it's not bad to get. If it's 8 coins, you probably don't want to spend the 8 coins early because there's some other things that are 8 coin costs that you'd want to get instead. But next would be Killshot. Definitely want to get him. He is considered by most the best mech in the game, or if not, certainly like one of the best. But a lot of people would call him the best mech in the game, which rightly so. He's super good, super useful. Get him, and you want to take him to end game. Hopefully you can get him to 3 stars pretty quickly, just because at 3 stars with 12 energy, he can put on some solid weapons early on. If not, you could use maybe the Javelin Rack 4 if you have them, or RPG 4s for right now. But beyond that, there's some other options quickly in the progress path we'll talk about for him. Shotgun 2s, I think they cost 8 coins, not worth getting. 2 energy weapons, not worth it. Long Arm 10 is a great weapon for mid and even some into late game for a lot of people. Really solid weapon, but one that you probably won't use a ton this early in the game. So this is one to put a pin in and get later or invest into later if you get it now. Shotgun 4 is not one that you're going to be using long term, but it's not a bad one to get and actually put on Killshot if you can't upgrade him. It does cost some 8 coins, which, you know, I'm not crazy about. So if you're low on 8 coins or you're trying to save for a couple other things in the progress path, like we'll talk about in a minute, probably want to hold off on this one and just like work on getting kill shot up there so you can get him up to 3 stars and put some other weapons on him. But it's actually a pretty good weapon. A lot of people use it early game with kill shot. It's pretty good, so that's an option there. The Pulse Cannon 4 you can skip. The Plasma Cannon 2 you can skip. MD is one that, again, is a fun mech and not bad for later on, certainly as a support role because he's the only healing mech in the game, but not one that you're really going to want to get and invest too much into yet, so you can put a pin in him and do that later. Then we get into the rocket mortars. There's 3 rocket mortar sets, and this is the lowest one. This actually comes in a pair, though, so it's nice to have early game, but it costs a decent amount of A coins to get for only being useful early game. I've seen other people early game using it. It's not bad here, and certainly if you like this play style, it's nice, but this is one of those weapons that doesn't last as long. You really want to invest in the one, I think, that will carry you to end game, and that would be the Rocket Mortar 12. So if you get this one, I wouldn't invest into it too much, but it's not a bad one to have early game if you like the long range style there. Plasma Cannon 6s are the best of the Plasma Cannon, really only useful for completing some achievements in my mind, otherwise pretty well useless. I would pass by it. Alright, then we get into a few weapons that are actually quite useful here. The Javelin Rack 6 is one of the 6 energy weapons that I think is pretty solid. This has been one of the common ones that people put on their kill shot once they get it to 3 stars. Really good weapon set for kill shot there. Also good for other people that are 12 energy. Great on Paragon, Ares, Panther, a lot of stuff early on. Very useful weapon. So I would highly recommend getting this one if you can get up the A coins for it. Next, we have the Missile Rack 8. Now, when this becomes available, you may not have the credits for it, but you want to save for it because this one is really good. Super good early, really good mid-game, and even used late game. This is a great weapon. Everybody uses this one, super good, and that's why so many people are pumped about the Missile Rack 12, and we'll talk about that one a little bit later. All right, the Arc Torrent 6. The Arc Torrent, I have a video on this one, and is it good for the Arc Torrents? That one focused mainly on the 10, though. The 6 is kind of subpar. When you get to this point, and then as you start going further on, again, this is where most 6 energy weapons will start to drop off. The Arc Torrent 6 isn't bad, but I don't think it's great either, so you probably should be saving, if you haven't, your credits for the Missile Rack 8, but if you got more credits or you bought some stuff, then it's not bad to get. I just don't think it's amazing. You could probably pass over it. All right, Ares. Ares is a solid tank. I'm assuming most people have not really invested too much into Juggernaut, at least not for a couple stars, and Ares is a solid option. These are both commonly compared, and a lot of people say that Ares has a little bit of a leg up over Juggernaut. Really, that's a preference thing. I still think both are pretty viable, but since this one comes already at 3 stars, 12 energy, it's pretty solid out of the box, and because a lot of people tend to favor it, I'm assuming if you haven't used much of Juggernaut, this is a great one to pick up. So he's a good one to get for sure. Then we have the Pulse Cannon 8. Originally, I did not like this weapon when I did the progress path, but it's grown on me quite a bit. You can actually see I've done an Is It Good video for the Pulse Cannons, as well as a comparison with the Carbine 8s, if you want to check out those videos, so you can see where I sit with those. But honestly, I think this is a pretty good weapon. It needs some upgrading, but it's one that you can get, especially if you want to do this and save some money and A coins and not get the Carbine 8s. So I think if that's your goal, then you probably want to get this and invest somewhat into it. Then we have the Rocket Mortar 10s. This is a pretty solid weapon, I think, in its own right, but it's one that you'd have to invest a decent amount to be able to get the second copy of it, and not a lot of people use Rocket Mortar 10s because there are Rocket Mortar 12s, right? So a lot of people invest into those and then get dual copies of those. So this weapon, many people don't really use too much, and I don't necessarily recommend getting it if you plan to use the 12s. All right, the Missile Rack 6 is kind of similar to the Arc Torrent 6. Both are decent weapons platforms, but at 6 energy, they're low. So you're investing or buying a decent amount of credits to get these. If you still have some mechs that are like 12 energy or somewhere in that range, you might find these kind of weapons useful. Between the Arc Torrent 6 and the Missile Rack 6, I think I tend to favor the Missile Rack 6 a little bit. I may do a video about comparing the two in the future, just because a lot of people ask about it and I want to explain why. But yeah, it's not bad, but it's only going to have limited use. So, pick at your discretion for this one. Shadow's a really fun mech. I really like the strategy and the skill involved in Shadow, but he's really expensive to not only get, but then also to upgrade. So it's one that if you want to get this guy again, maybe put a pin in it and come back to him later, just before you have all the core stuff in your hangar that you need. Then we have the Pulse Cannon 6. This is not a good one. You can pass over this one. Then we have the Rocket Mortar 12. Like I was saying, with the Rocket Mortars, this is the highest one and probably the one you want to get if you're going to get the Rocket Mortars. So get this guy and then expect to eventually upgrade it if you plan to use it. I don't love the Rocket Mortars, but I do use them end game. There is definite uses for them in specific play. So I still got this one, and I think it's a decent one to get and invest into. Then we have the Stasis Beam 12. This one is kind of expensive for a support-based weapon and maybe not one that you have to get right away. It's not a bad weapon. I actually find it quite useful and it works great for certain builds, but it's one that I think most people don't necessarily have to get. Some people want to get it because they want to have a new weapon, nice and shiny, around this time, but for the 8 coins you invest into it, it'll play nice for some support roles, but it's not necessarily going to be a big damage weapon. So some people might be underwhelmed by it, but some people may love it for support. So if you like support, it's solid, but if you also, even if you like support, you may want to get the Stasis Beam 16, which comes up in a little bit. All right, so maybe put a pin in that one. Then we got the Guardian. Guardian, again, is a top tier mech. Like we've said before, probably arguably one of the top 3. So it's like this, Panther and Killshot tend to be the 3 that most people say are top end. So definitely want to get this guy and invest into him for end game. Absolutely worth it. Then we have the Carbine 8s. If you're a person who has been with the Pulse Cannon, invested into that, keep doing that. If you were saving to get the Carbine 8s, you can get them here. To me, I personally think the amount of 8 coins spent on this is better used for Carbine 10, Carbine 12, Railgun, something else later on in the progress path. So I don't think you need to get this one. But if you're also someone who spends money in game, this is probably one that's worth buying than trying to unlock through the progress path to get it earlier and just get the early benefit of having a nice 5-star top tier weapon earlier on. So not necessarily one I think is necessary in the progress path. Then we have the Stasis Beam 16. This is a pretty solid support weapon. Good, high caliber, freezes pretty quickly, freezes faster than the 12, and it's only credits to get. So I think overall it's a pretty solid weapon if you play the support role. Can work nice with the Thermal Lance 6 together. Great weapons platform there for the support role. Moving right along. Then we got the Arc Turret 10. Like I said, we have the Is It Good for the Arc Turret, and I mostly focus on this weapon. I see a lot of this weapon in endgame hangers. So this is a great weapon to get, great one to invest in and get that second copy to use for different builds. Very solid weapon to get. Definitely recommend it. Cheetah is one. I also have an Is It Good on this one. Cheetah is one I'm not a huge fan of. I don't think he's that great. There are some people who love Cheetah, and for like certain strategy and play, he can be great for it, but I just don't think he is worth the cost. He's a pretty good chunk of 8 coins, and based on how much I use him and how much I've seen him, I don't think he's worth it. Plus, he's a light mech, so he's expensive to upgrade too. So I think you pass over him. All right. Getting closer to the end. Then we got the Carbine 10. Of the Carbine family, this being the middle one, and you only get one of them. It's not a bad one to get, but honestly for me, I think I only usually use like one Carbine 10 in my hanger. I don't even use 2. So it's one of those weapons that you want to upgrade for endgame, but if you're not going to use 2 copies of it like you will the Carbine 12, this might be one you can get later on and focus more on getting the 12 first. All right. So kind of a put a pin in this one and get it later deal again. Let's keep going here. Zephyr. All right, if Zephyr is not one of the top 3 mechs, he's probably like right below that, number 4, maybe number 5 for most people. Really solid mech, definitely worth getting and taking to end game. So you want to get him for sure. Then we got the Carbine 12. Of the Carbine family, this is the one to get and to dual copy. You will use this in your end game hanger, most definitely, both copies of it. So I do all the time. I see it all the time. Great weapon. Definitely worth getting. Then we got Redox. I have an Is It Good on Redox. I don't think he's that great, basically for the cost. He's one of the more expensive mechs in the game. He is nice if you're someone who spends money early on to get all the benefit of a 5-star, 24 energy mech at top end. But if you don't spend money and you're getting him this late in the progress path, you probably already have other good stuff that's at 5 or 6 stars. And saving up to 8,000 8 coins to get this guy, which I think is what he's at now, is a lot to spend on a mech. You'd expect a lot from him. I don't think he does anything major or important that other, of the main ones that you use. Like we said, of the top 3 mechs, there's 2 other, Panther and Guardian, typically, that most people say are top tier, that already have the max amount, the same amount of energy this guy does, and you will use those more than you use him. So I don't really think he's worth getting. Maybe when we get more high energy weapons, when you want to have an all heavy hanger, that won't be bad. Next up, we got Surge. Surge, I believe, is the most expensive mech in the game, with Redox right behind it. I actually haven't done an is it good for Surge. I think he's got potential, but I think he's very difficult to use. He's pretty high skill, and he has, you know, more fringe uses than some other mechs. And for being the most expensive, that's kind of a deal breaker for me. I'd expect a lot of him. He's not a bad mech, but it's a lot to spend, and it'll feel underwhelming when you consider how much you've spent in 8 coins to get him versus some of the other mechs that you have. So this one is not bad, but I don't necessarily think a lot of people need to get him. Then Brick House. This is the last of the tanks that we have for the 3 tanks. Very different in the terms of, like, plays more support role than Ares or Juggernaut would in boosting the team's damage. Really interesting mech. I don't see a ton of him on the field. I tend to see more Juggernaut or Ares, even when players use him, not just AI. So I don't think he's quite as good as either of those in the traditional tank role, but I think in certain team setups he can be good and be a lot of fun. So I think he's a fun mech, but I don't think he's necessary for a lot of people. So I don't think you need to get him. He's a lot of credits, which is nice. So he's not 8 coins, but it's almost 1,000,000 credits. So it's still a lot to save up for. So I don't know. I tend to think that upgrades for those other mechs are better than getting that one. And then we have the Railgun, last one in the list, and the Railgun is the, you know, cream of the crop. It's the best weapon in the game by many. Definitely worth getting and getting second copies of. Even if you haven't used the long arms, which is what this is mostly derived from, I still think it's going to be a worthy weapon for you to get and then get practice with and feel comfortable with. If you already use the long arms and like those, you're going to love the Railgun. If you don't, then you should practice with it, just because I think, you know, you see enough of it end game to know that it's like one of the top end type of weapons to have end game to focus on. All right, so that's all that we have right now, and we have gotten also the Disc Launcher 8, and we're gonna have the other Disc Launcher variants. We've also seen hints of the Javelin 6 and the Misirect 12, so let's talk about all that. We don't have the, oh, and I got it here on my Panther actually. We don't have the Disc Launcher 8 yet in the progress path, so I don't know exactly where that's going to be, but from what I've seen of it, I don't think it's necessarily one you have to get. This is similar to like carbines or anything like that, or Pulse Cannon 8s. They're nice for their uses for when you get them, so if this comes up earlier in the progress path and you can get it at a good price, it's not bad to get, but if it ends up too far or too much later in the game, it's going to feel underwhelming in its power, and that's kind of been the way this weapon functions. It plays more based on its you know, flexibility than it does on its straight damage. So that's not great for the Disc Launcher 8, but the other variants that we're getting, whether that's a 10 or a 12 or a 12 and a 16, those I think are going to be good weapons to get. I think the damage is going to be strong enough on them just as higher caliber weapons that we're going to want to get those. So when those come up in the progress path, I think those are worth considering. Usually the highest one, whether that's the 12 or the 16, is going to be the one you're likely going to want to invest in for the end game, right? That's usually the case with anything. Higher end weapons are going to be better for you. The Javelin 8 is very interesting. The Javelin 6, I still sometimes will see mid to late game, just because even though it's 6 energy, it's such a great weapons platform. It's so useful. I still see people using it sometimes in mixed builds and all that kind of stuff. So naturally, the Javelin 8, I think, is going to be a great weapon. I think it's going to be very useful for a lot of people. Being an 8 energy weapon puts it kind of on the edge, but I still think because of how good the weapons platform is designed and works for a lot of people, there's going to be people who use it pretty effectively. So I think that might be one worth getting, especially if you like the Javelin 6. And then, of course, we have the Misirect 12. This is the best one, in my opinion, out of what we've seen of the new weapons, just because, like I've said, Misirect 8 is one of the few 8 weapons that you really see in just about everyone's high-end hangar, even over 4K. So the Misirect 12, naturally, at a higher caliber, is going to be there. When this comes out, I don't know what the price is going to be or where it's going to be in the progress path, but it'll be worth getting, and it'll be worth maxing out to get your second copy. So, yeah, that's all I can say right now without actually having any of these weapons, like myself, to be able to use them. But that covers everything in the progress path. So I hope that gives you guys a good updated insight as to what you can focus on. And, you know, if you hear this and then you worry like, oh great, I got all these terrible weapons that I shouldn't have, don't worry about it. When I first did the progress path, that mattered because there were certain challenges that you had to deal with specifically related to them for your daily challenge, so it was a pain. Now that kind of stuff is cycled out of daily and has been pushed into achievements, so you don't really need to worry about getting bad weapons, you know, aside from just like the money you invested into getting them. As long as you're still able to progress in the game, it's not going to hurt you a whole lot, so don't worry a whole lot about it. But I'm trying to tell you the things that are best for you to get so that as your XP climbs and you start getting harder AI and harder players, you'll have the best tools you can to be able to fight them off. So I hope that's helpful. As I've said before, if you have other comments, agree, disagree, have other comments you want to say about the progress path, feel free to leave them below, and we'll see you out there on the battlefield.